A topic that's also very important to know is a topic about indirect proportion, or you can call it nonlinear relationship inversely proportional. That means that something is not a straight line. If we look at the definition of this, it will look as follows. An increase in one of the quantities by a certain factor will bring about a decrease in the other quantity by the same factor. These quantities are inversely proportional. If the one value goes up, the other value will go down. Let's look at an example. The cost for petrol to travel to work for a week amounts to 500 Rand. You decide to let some of your colleagues travel with you so that they may share the petrol cost equally. That means if you're going to go throw in petrol, that will amount to 500 Rand. Now they can ask you various questions. Determine the cost per person if there's one person in the car. Now, if there's only one person in the car, that means the cost will be equal to 500 Rand. Determine the cost per person if there's two people in the car. That means these two people will pay 500 Rand together. They will share the cost. If they share something, that means division. So therefore it will be 500 Rand divided by 2, which will amount to 250 Rand per person. So each one of them will pay 250 Rand now. They can also ask you, determine the cost per person if there's 3 people in the car. That means if there's 3 people, they will pay 500 Rand together. They are sharing. Therefore, you divide 500 divided by 3. And that will amount to 166 Rand and 67 cents. Each person will now pay 166 Rand and 67 cents. If there's 4 people in a car, that means that all 4 of them together will pay 500 Rand. Remember, they are sharing. Therefore, you divide. So it will be 500 Rand divided by 4, which will amount to 125 Rand. So each one of those people will pay 125 Rand. If there's 5 people in the car now, all 5 of them will share that amount. So therefore it will be 500 Rand divided by 5, which will amount to 100 Rand. And each person will pay that 100 Rand. If we summarize it, it will look as follows in the table. And they can also ask you to determine it inside a table where they have left out certain values. For example, they have left out at number 2. How much will they pay if there's 2 people in the car? Then you will follow the same principle. 500 divided by 2, which will amount to 250 Rand. Now they can ask you, determine the number of people sharing the cost if the weekly cost per person is 83 Rand 33. Can it be possible? Remember, they pay 500 Rand together. So now we want to see how much of that 83 Rand 33 can go into the 500 Rand. So we divide 500 divided by 83 Rand 33. You get an answer of 6,0024,001. We round off, and remember, we don't get a half a person. We will always round off to a whole number. So therefore, it will be 6 people. Now, can it be possible that there's 6 people in the car? It's possible, but very unlikely, as the car will be overloaded. They can also ask you to write down a formula that can be used to calculate the weekly petrol cost per person sharing. Remember, a formula is in words. So what did we do every time? We said the total cost was 500 Rand. And every time we divided it by how many people there were in the car. So therefore, your formula will look as follows. The weekly petrol cost per person will be equal to the total cost divided by the number of people in the car. What was the total cost? It was 500 Rand. And then you just say divided by the number of people in the car. Now from here, I can also ask you to draw a graph to show the relationship between the weekly petrol cost and the number of people sharing the cost. There's a table that we also referred to in the previous slide. Remember, they will always give you a lecture where you have to draw on. Now let's look at the first point that you need to plot. The first point will be 1 for number of people, and the per person petrol cost is 500 Rand. So the number of people is 1 and the per person cost was 500 Rand. So you make your first point. The second is 2 people. So number of people is 2 and the per person petrol cost is 250. You make your next point. The next point that you need to plot is 3, number of people, and 166 Rand 67, and you plot your point. The next is 4 people and 125 Rand, where you plot your point. And the last point that you need to plot is 5 and 100. And now you combine those points that you have plotted. Do you see that it forms a curve? It does not form a straight line. And that is also part of the next question. What type of proportion is represented by the graph? We call this type of graph an indirect or inverse proportion. Why do we call that? Because as the number of people in the car becomes more, it increases. The cost per person decreases. It goes down because you are paying less per person.